Hi everyone, I'm Libby and I get to show you a really delicious recipe with black bean brownies. And some of you may have made this before, but I'm here to tell you that it's just really amped up when we're able to add essential oils to it. Really simple recipe. Don't worry about writing down ingredients or amounts and that kind of thing. We'll post the link for the actual recipe. But I just did want to note that the recipe itself just calls for peppermint oil. But just know that you can substitute another oil in. If you'd rather do spearmint, I love spearmint, it's one of my personal favorites. You could do spearmint in chocolate, right? What doesn't go well with chocolate? Do orange in chocolate. Do some On Guard with chocolate or some cinnamon with chocolate. The sky's the limit. Seriously, I know people that like lavender with their chocolate. Just be creative and find what works best for you. So really simple recipe. You're just going to need a food processor of some kind, a blender, something like that. So I have my drained black beans here, and those just get dumped in like that. Then I have 2 eggs. Just break them right into it, like that. Okay, and then we need to have our, I like to do the coconut oil. So it calls for coconut oil and honey. And one thing that I like to do is I put my coconut oil and I melt it in a glass container, and then I put the honey in the container as well. And that actually helps it so you don't have to scrape as much to get the honey out. It slides out a little more easily, and you get more, there's less waste, right? You get more of your actual ingredients in there. So I say that and then it gets stuck. So okay, if it hadn't been sitting for so long, it probably would have worked. All right, there we go. Then we do the cocoa powder. Go around like that. And some baking powder. Not baking soda, baking powder. And then your oil. I'm going to do peppermint oil, and we just do 4 drops of that, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how you do the drops. And salt. I almost forgot the salt. So it says just a pinch of salt, a dash of salt. So I'm just going to do a few little things like that. Salt is critical for flavor, as you well know. And we run the food processor really quickly. Hey everyone, I'm back. It's about 35 minutes later. We took a little pause there for the brownies to bake. So I'm back, and I just realized after I paused the recording before that I forgot to tell you, when you're putting it into your 8x8 container, 8x8 casserole dish, make sure to grease it first. I just like coconut oil. You can spray it, whatever you like to do for your baking, but definitely make sure to grease it first. And then, like I said, you bake it for 30 to 35 minutes, and when you pull it out, it'll look like this. This is still pretty hot, so I'll see if I can show you. See, like that. Looks just like a brownie. It's fabulous. They're very cakey brownies, but when you tap them like that, it should bounce back up. So then you'll know that it's done. The original recipe, I believe, actually says to sprinkle the chocolate chips over the top before you put it in to bake. I didn't do that for a reason, because I like to add another little boost of flavor to my brownies without frosting and too much extra work. So what I do instead is I melt the chocolate chips. I melt them in the microwave just right before I'm taking this out, or right as I've taken that out. I'll throw these in for about 30 seconds, stir them around till they're nice and liquidy. And then you add 1 drop of oil, only 1. It's really powerful. In fact, it might be too powerful for some people. You might want to do just a toothpick of essential oil into it. But I have my peppermint oil again, and so I have to be really careful to do just 1 drop. And take my eyes off of it. There we go. Here it comes. And drop. Okay, like that, and then pull it away really fast, because you won't die if you get 2 drops in it, but it's really, really potent. Stir it up like that, and then you just kind of drizzle it over the top. So like I said, it just adds an extra flavor, an extra boost of flavor. And like some of the instructions we've given you about cooking, it also preserves a lot of the therapeutic benefit of the oils because you're not cooking the oils. And that is always good, right? When we can get more out of what we're baking. So there you go. You have some yummy brownies. And I hope you enjoy this recipe. I hope you enjoy all of the recipes that we have to share. So I want to make with you today some cranberry sauce. Some homemade cranberry sauce. It's much easier than you think it would be. For me, it's really even easier than going to the store and buying a can of the cranberry sauce. So simple to make it. So all we need is a bag of the fresh cranberries. You can also use frozen cranberries. They have very similar nutrient value, and that's what we're looking for, is as much nutrition as we can get in the food that we eat. So what you do is you put it in a little colander like this. I've already dumped mine in and rinsed it out. You kind of pick out any of there might be some that are a little bit mushy, so you want to pick those out. You want nice, firm cranberries. Aren't those beautiful? That beautiful red color, full of antioxidants, full of vitamin K, vitamin C, all kinds of trace minerals. You'd be really surprised to know how great cranberries are for you. So we put them in a pot. Very simple, just nice pot like that. Dump them in. We add a third cup of water, like that, and a third cup of sweetener. So I like to use honey in mine. You're obviously very welcome to use white sugar, brown sugar, whatever you like. And I'm going to give you another tip here in a minute. So this is just a third cup of honey. But one thing that I do around the holidays is I prepare my regular foods, but in the past several years, I have found that by just reducing the sugar that's in a recipe, I can get away with even using up to half the sugar or the sweetener in a recipe and still enjoying the flavor. And I do that by adding essential oils to it. So after we cook this, it's going to bring it to a boil, and it's going to simmer for about 10 minutes. And after we do that, then we'll add an essential oil to it. So I just added the honey. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I just added the honey, and now this recipe is called Sweet and Spicy Cranberry Sauce. It comes from the doTERRA blog. So you can do just the sweet part of it if you're not a spicy fan. My husband is not a fan of spicy, so we often have to compromise because I love spice. So the compromise this time is that instead of using a whole jalapeno, I'm just using a half of the jalapeno. Compromise, that's what it's all about. So I've chopped it up here. I'm just going to put it in there. I'm going to, like I said, put it on the stove, bring it to a boil, and let it simmer for about 10 minutes. I'm going to pause the video here for a second so that you can see the end result and you don't have to sit here and look at my kitchen for 10 minutes. Okay, so hold on. Okay, that was quick. Movie magic is awesome, isn't it? I'm back and I have completely finished cranberry sauce. I wanted to show you here just how great it looks. You can see just that the cranberries just pop open and just make this nice, wonderful gel. You don't need to add any extra thickeners or anything. It's just wonderful as it is. It's just a little bit of sweetener in it. And now the fun part, we get to decide which essential oil to put into it. The original recipe calls for wild orange, which is a fabulous complement to the cranberries. Natural flavor. You can also do maybe a lime, any of the other citruses, a lime. I love lime. A lemon oil, or maybe go a little different direction. Maybe you want some cinnamon, kind of spice it up a little bit. Maybe some cinnamon oil or some cassia oil. Maybe even just some ginger, right? All of these are great, and the great thing about this is they also have some digestive properties that really help with digesting your food so that you're not feeling that bloated, yucky blah after your big Thanksgiving or Christmas meal. So just some ideas. Oh, I'm going to put orange in mine because I know my family will really like that. So this is how you do it, right? It's really complicated. First thing is, I don't know if I mentioned this before, make sure that it is an oil that can be taken internally. I've told you guys, I love doTERRA. I love their testing process. I trust that it really is just 100% orange oil in this bottle, and so I feel comfortable using it for myself and my family.
just check the label. It'll tell you whether you can take it internally or not. If it says it's a supplement, then it can be taken internally. Otherwise, don't put it inside your body. Easy enough. Okay, so 3 drops of this. And this is how we do it. You just tip it in like this, and sometimes it comes out faster. 1, 2, 3, like that. All done. And if you get an extra drop or 2, it's not the end of the world. Just be really, really strong. Just stir it up like that. And voila, there we're done. You can put it into a container with a lid like this. Seal it tight, put it in your fridge. And it is fantastic to make it even a few days ahead of time. Gives those flavors a chance to meld and thickens up really nicely. Or you can just serve it fresh, whatever you have time for, right, when it comes down to it. A couple of ways we like to use it, obviously on the turkey, that's kind of the traditional way. I also like to use it as a condiment. I'll put it on, or I mean as a dip, I'll put it on top of a block of goat cheese, that creamy, yummy goat cheese, and serve it with crackers. It's delicious that way. So just a few extra tips there.
Hi. So I am going to share with you now a recipe that I've tried a couple of times and I adore it. It's so delicious. And because I'm trying to cut out a little bit of gluten and wheat and sugar out of my diet, kind of just get a little bit healthier. This was an experiment that I found on the internet that turned out really well. And so I'm continuing to make it. So what it's called is pumpkin cloud bread. You may have heard of cloud bread before. It is basically just a bread made from, or a loaf made of eggs and a little bit of flavoring. So not much texture to it, and I've had it before and didn't really adore it. But I saw this recipe. I love pumpkin. I figured it was worth a try. Plus, it has, and it calls for protein powder, which I think adds to the texture and kind of helps it a little bit. So I'm gonna switch the video around here so you can see what is in this recipe. Okay, so there's the recipe right there. I printed it out. It's from a lady that I can't remember the website. It's the Sugar Free Mom, I believe. Anyway, so what I put in it is, what you do first is you separate your eggs. So I use my little egg separator and got my egg whites there. I don't have them completely beat yet, with a little bit of cream of tartar in it. And then in the other bowl, you put your yolks and pumpkin puree. She uses stevia for her sweetener. I don't have stevia on hand, at least not the kind that she's talking about. So I actually just used agave, and it worked really well last time, so I'm doing it again. And you see that white powder in there. I'm trying a little bit of experiment on this one. The first time I made it, the loaf it cooked up, it looked beautiful, but as it cooled, it sunk down a little bit. So one of the people on the website recommended that you add a little bit of baking powder to it. So I just put like a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, and then there's salt there as well. And then I haven't added it yet, but I did this last time, it worked fabulous. I'm using the vanilla trim shake in it. So if you have vanilla, that's great. If you have the vegan one, the V-Shake, that's a good one too. And that's it. So I'm going to pause the recording for a bit and whip up these egg whites and then show you how to mix it. Oh, sorry. This is the other part I forgot I'm going to tell you. So she also calls for pumpkin spice. Well, I don't really keep pumpkin spice on hand, but I do have my oils on hand. So we're doing clove oil, cinnamon oil, like that, ginger oil, and I'm just going to do 1 drop of each of those. And then I love to add wild orange. Anytime I'm doing those 3 oils, there's just something about adding that wild orange, and I do 3 drops of the wild orange. So it tastes amazing with it. So pause here for a minute, and be right back. Okay, movie magic, I'm back, and you can see here the egg whites are all whipped up. You want really stiff peaks. So do you see that? If you've never done egg whites before, don't worry, it's not as scary as it sounds. Adding the cream of tartar really helps it to go up really fast. I think it took me about 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds to get it to this point. It was really pretty fast. And you see there just how it's
holding its shape. You pull it in. This is how you know it's a stiff peak, is that it holds its shape like that. Sorry, I need a cameraman. So the next step, I've mixed up the pumpkin part of it. I put the essential oils in it. I put the trim shake in it. So now comes the process of incorporating the two of these together. And this is probably the most complicated part of this recipe, because you don't want to deflate. Clean those beaters off a little bit. You don't want it to deflate these beautiful peaks. So you have to do this process a little bit more slowly. And what that looks like is, this is how I like to do it. There might be a more professional way to do it, but this is me. So, and I'm not a professional. So I take some of the egg whites here and mix them in here first. So the problem is that the egg whites are light and fluffy, right? And this pumpkin mixture is not. It's heavier. And so if I were to dump the whole thing in there just as it is, it would deflate those egg whites really fast, and then the bread wouldn't rise, and it would affect the flavor and the texture and all that. And so we want this to be super tasty. So you see, as it's mixing in, the pumpkin is getting a little bit lighter in color. It's also getting a lighter texture. So I'll do that a couple of times, mixing more of the egg whites in just slowly at a time. And you're kind of more folding it. You see, I just kind of go underneath it and lift it up over the top, kind of folding it in that way. So I'm going to pause again and come back as soon as it's all incorporated. All right, so movie magic again, and we're done mixing it up. You can see I just had a little bit there on the end. So this is what it looks like. You see that super creamy smoothie. It's still got all the air in it from those wonderful little egg whites. So what I'm going to do now is put it in the loaf pan. So the oven is preheated to 300 degrees, and I prepared these loaf pans. The original recipe said to use a 9x5 pan, which I have a 9x5 loaf pan, but I like this smaller pan for this idea, and I like to be able to have these little tiny pans, and I'll tell you why I do that later. But anyway, I grease it with, I use coconut oil because I worry that if I use olive oil or whatever, it might interfere with the flavor of the pumpkin and so forth. So I just use good old organic coconut oil and grease it up a little bit. We'll put it in and fill it just a little over halfway full, and then put it in the oven for 45 to 50 minutes. I think I'm going to err on the side of 50 minutes this time. It might be a little bit browner, but I'm hoping that will also keep it from falling in the middle. So stay tuned. I'll be back in just a few minutes to show you the results. Well, it'll be a few minutes for you guys. For me, it's going to be about 45 to 50 minutes. So I'll see you soon. Hey everybody, so the bread is done. I took the small loaves out earlier. They only took about 30 minutes to cook. And then I left the larger loaf pan in for the full 50 minutes. And actually, I think I went over a little bit because I was on the phone, and so I missed taking it out right on the timer. So it overcooked a little bit, I think, but it still looks good. So I'm going to show you what I did here. Let me flip the camera around. Okay, so here's the small loaves. You can see I took them out. I put them right up here on top of the stove, thinking that that would help them not collapse as much. And they definitely didn't collapse as much as the first time I made this recipe. So I'm thinking that the heat is the key to it. And they'll still taste good, even if they're not super pretty, right? They'll still taste really yummy. And some things that I do with these, I slice them and I just put them on a skillet. You can just eat them plain, but I like to make French toast out of them. But the cool thing is it's already full of eggs, so I don't even have to I don't do anything to it. I basically just toast them on a skillet or a frying pan, and they taste like French toast without doing anything else. So just toasting, really fabulous. So here's the larger loaf pan. I'm experimenting again, and I think this is going to actually work because I left it in the oven. I turned the oven off and just opened the door so that the oven is cooling down, but it's still warmer than the air in my kitchen. So the loaf itself isn't collapsing as much. It has gone down a little bit. It had a nice dome when I first opened the door, but I think this is going to be the key, is keeping it kind of warm, letting it cool down let it cool down more slowly. So I hope you enjoyed that recipe. I hope that you're going to give it a try. And at the end of this video of the series here that I'm making of all these different recipes, I will tell you how to get the recipe itself. Hey everybody, so this is the last segment of our cooking with our essential holiday cooking video, and I wanted to give you one last little tip. So we've talked a lot about dropping oils into recipes, we talked about the potency and the purity and all of those important things, but one method that we've mentioned, I think, in passing, and it's definitely in the ebook, in the cookbook that you're receiving, is the toothpick method. And so this is sometimes hard to visualize how to do it. I had a problem with it until I saw someone do it, and then it made sense to me. So I wanted to show you what the toothpick method looks like. So first of all, this is a method we use for the hot oils, for things like basil and oregano, thyme oil, rosemary oil, any of those really spicy, herbaceous, really potent ones. Cinnamon, cassia, what else? I know I'm missing some. But anyway, if you kind of just think of any of the hot oils, those are ones that you typically, for smaller recipes, you'd want to just use a toothpick for them rather than a full drop. If you're making a big pot of something, then 1 drop of oregano will probably go a long way. And better to err on the side of too little than having too much and ruining it. So that is the first tip. So this is, I'm going to show you here, trying to do it. I wish I had someone here recording me because then they could hold the camera, but I'm going to prop it up here and show you what the toothpick method looks like. All right. So here we are. So this is what it looks like. I have here just a little container full of olive oil, and all the recipes will have some kind of other liquid that you're putting into them. Even if it's pumpkin puree, you can do the same method into any kind of puree or liquid. So you take your toothpick, this is basil oil, and you're not going to drop a whole drop on it, but if you see this, as you tip it, a little bit of the oil is just kind of residue there on the side. That's what you're picking up on your toothpick. So then you immediately, you don't want it to soak in too much. You immediately, so some of the recipes will say dip and then pull it out. It means they just want a little bit, so you just dip it in and pull it out really quick. So you're just smelling it, just a little tiny bit in there. Some of the recipes will say a swirl, and so you'll do a swirl around like that. Some of them will say 2 to 3 swirls, which means that you will need 2 or 3 toothpicks full. And so you'll just, if it's 2, you can just use the other side of your toothpick. And you don't ever want to stick the toothpick down inside the bottle. That could cause contamination in it. You just want it here on the outside edge. And so you get another little drop, not a full drop there, right? Just kind of infusing it there on the end of the toothpick, and you do another swirl like that, and it just adds up. Yeah, you can totally smell that basil just after 2 little drops. So that is what the toothpick method looks like. I hope that helps. I really hope you enjoy the recipes that are in that ebook, and I can't wait to see you post. You can email them to me, text them to me. I'd love to see the pictures of what you're making.